Welcome. Welcome to you at home, to our audience here, and most importantly, to Dr. Rebecca Harding. We first started working with Dr. Harding last year when she prepared a report on what's happening in the freight industry. And what we're particularly interested in our growing business in Amazon Freight is what's been happening in the past before we were even created. How does our current experience match with that of the industry? And then most importantly, what's coming along into the future? So a little bit about me. I'm Chris Rowe, the Managing Director of Amazon Freight. I've been with Amazon now for nearly 10 years, originally in European supply chain, and for the last roughly 18 months in Amazon Freight. Before that, I've got a background in operations, logistics, and finance in the supermarket industry. So I've come from a very stable, building-based retailer world, and now I'm in the world of e-commerce and digitalization. And I'm particularly interested in Dr. Harding's background because she's seen things from the wider macro and micro level. But I'm sure she could tell you more of that than I can. So Dr. Harding, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's an absolute delight to be here, real privilege. So my background is in trade economics and trade, so it's you can feel sorry for me now if you'd like to. I have specialised through my career in understanding international business and how flows of trade between the world are affected by economic factors, but then also by things like geopolitics and so on. So we're really looking at a career that has done lots of things. I was head of corporate research at Deloitte. I've done lots of government advisory work. I was chief economist of the British Bankers Association, which is now UK Finance. And so one of the things that's happened is constantly all the way through that is understanding how businesses grow, how they innovate, what their key challenges are, how supply chains work, and obviously with the data and everything behind it. So I've also set up 3 data companies, so I understand your entrepreneurial journey.
One thing that customers have asked me about is the trends that are happening in the industry so far. So I'm interested in what you've seen in 2024 so far and what are the trends?
It's quite easy. Have a heart for the small company in all of this. It's really important that we think about, in terms of freight and logistics, the pressures that smaller businesses are under in this sector, because they're being squeezed out by a lot of regulation, they're being squeezed out by access to finance, they're being squeezed out by huge geopolitical uncertainty, huge geoeconomic uncertainty, and also the one thing we love talking about, which is technology. So if you look at the survey that we conducted, not everything in the garden was rosy. We were slightly concerned because what the smaller freight and logistics companies were telling us is that they've really got cost pressures at the moment. And I mean, we've all got cost pressures because of the cost of living crisis, because of cross-border crossings. We've got the cross-border carbon adjustment coming through. All of those things are adding to a general climate of uncertainty that's pushing up costs. It's causing a real anxiety there. But then the other thing that came loud and clear through was a sense that larger organisations, and maybe governments and regulators as well, need to set the parameters of technology, because many of these organisations are not sure about how to implement the new technologies, and they're kind of putting it in the too difficult box at the moment. So that's creating real challenges in terms of the speed at which we can then reduce costs and streamline things. So there's kind of a paradox going on there. And then the other thing, so the third thing that's really important within all of this is sustainability. So the companies told us that they genuinely want to make a difference. So if we are going to do something, then it's something that we can all take a responsibility for, but we need some clear guidelines on how to do that. Our clients are telling us that we need to do this. Our suppliers and our buyers are telling us that we need to do this. So we need to think about how we can mesh those 3 problems together: the technology, the sustainability, and the costs. because that's what the future will be.
Well, you covered a lot of ground there, so I'm going to have to break that up. So you mentioned freight costs for our shippers, and I think it's been a roller coaster over the last few years. First of all, we had COVID, where the need to move things around was just a lot higher because people were dispersed, at the same time as the supply of freight was reduced. So we saw very high costs, and we saw an all-time high freight cost in 2022. We then saw that those inventory levels were built up, so the need to move things around became less, which then meant we had an oversupply. And we've then come now in 2024 to a very quickly tightening freight market. So what's your view on volatility for our customers?
So everyone, but your customers in particular at the moment, are really affected by this uncertainty. So 2024 has really been the year of uncertainty, but before that 2023 was the year of uncertainty, and before that 2022 was the year of uncertainty. We really haven't settled into a new normal since COVID. And I think part of that is, well, the way it's displaying itself is in terms of costs. So what you're seeing is an up and down of costs. You don't know, because supply isn't equaling demand all the way around the world. You're having shipping diverted. Trade has actually shifted. It's moved around the world. And what's begun to happen, of course, is that you no longer can be absolutely certain that you're going to be able to get something from A to B on a just-in-time basis. So what everybody is now working with is a just-in-case basis, which means that people are building up stock, and that's expensive, and then they're not sure whether that will get from A to B, and that's pushing up the actual shipping costs and the longer distances. I think I saw somewhere that the figures are somewhere between 250 and 450% increases in freight costs up and down like this. So it's not something that a small freight organisation can actually calculate at the moment. So what they have to do is go, uncertainty is the new normal. That's what I'm going to have to deal with, and build that in. But it means a huge amount of slack in an organisation's thinking, and that's very difficult to manage.
So I really love that term, just in case supply chain. It's actually the reason why we exist as a business, because by definition, the average thing that is going to happen is the P50 spot forecast. Also, by definition, if we plan to a P50 on an individual basis, we will disappoint customers in terms of capacity 50% of the time. And I think any business that disappointed customers 50% of the time will not last very long as a business. So I think the need for collaboration across our industry is the reason why I've got a job. In Amazon, we talk about customer obsession as one of the reasons that we're here. And part of that customer obsession means not being happy, disappointing customers 50% of the time. And the reason that Amazon Freight exists is to share capacity with our customers, so that when you look at total network demand, that just in case per business is reduced, and therefore the overall slack, as you mentioned, is lower across the network, which is good not just for Amazon customers getting parcels, not just for my customers, the business that I work with, but actually the network level.
So that's really interesting, isn't it? Because we're talking about cost reductions, and we're talking about how to create some slack, and a little bit of flexibility, because there needs to be a cost buffer there for smaller organisations. So how does Intermodal fit in with all of that? Because that should be a way of reducing costs as well, shouldn't it?
Yeah, so I love the idea of Intermodal, because for short journeys, we've got trucks that we've got battery electric trucks on the roads, but right now there isn't sufficient range for a battery truck to compete with a diesel truck. By using batteries for those shorter journeys right now until the technology can increase, and then using sea and rail for those longer stretches, you're able to move away the driver from the inventory and break up the journey into separate legs. One of the things that we've been doing in our business is to try to use those road and rail sections of the journey to both reduce costs and save carbon. And in the trials that we've been doing in 2023 onwards, what we've found is a cost saving by switching some of that road leg into rail. So I'm glad you brought that up. I think intermodal is a great way of, one, saving cost, and two, saving carbon. One of the things that we can do with intermodal is to break up the journey of inventory from source through to the customer. And for example, we could run a short battery vehicle to a rail station or to a port. We could then run rail and sea. And then at the other end, we can use a battery vehicle to get to the final customer. And one of the things that we've been using with our customers is those intermodal journeys. And in the trials that we've been doing since 2023 across sea and rail, we found a 20% cost saving versus road and a 50% carbon saving for those journeys that have been replaced. So that for me, that's a win-win, where you can save cost and reduce our carbon impact. That's a win-win. But I think in terms of the collaboration that you were talking about before, what we need to do is to increase the accessibility of those different ways of moving inventory to all businesses.
So you've given me a lot of impressive numbers there, and I'm really intrigued by this, because when you look at what companies said to us in the survey, they were really worried about sustainability was one thing, cost was another really big thing, but also delivery, on-time delivery. So how do the examples work around that? Because those are where the real concerns are, I think.
Yeah, I often hear a question of cost versus speed. And I think the key is to have cost and speed. And it's one thing that we've been doing in Sweden. We've launched a prime offer, next day delivery in Sweden. And by using Intermodal C, we've reduced the carbon of that prime delivery service by 25%. So I think if we choose the right leg, route and methods for the right purpose, you can reduce costs and increase speed. I like that shipper focus though, because that port aspect I think can be particularly difficult. So what do you think the challenges and solutions can be?
Well, big challenge 2024, 2023. If you look at the numbers going back over, say, a 5-10 year period, there's been a huge increase in port closures, which obviously adds to costs, which adds to shipping delays, etc., etc. But everybody assumes that because of the context that shipping is operating in at the moment and logistics is operating at the moment, that it's all trade choke points, all geopolitical things, and it isn't. And what's really interesting is in the last 18 months, there's been an exponential increase in the number of ports closed for climate reasons. So they're actually being closed because of hurricanes, because of earthquakes, because of things that are happening in the climate, extreme weather, etc. And that is one of the key things that I think is a challenge for the industry, because as we see climate change gathering pace, it's something that we're all going to have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, and it is increasing this perception of, as I said earlier, volatility, and it's putting cost pressures on the industry as well.
So if I take that small business aspect, if you could change one thing or advise the average, not that such a thing exists, small shipper of what should they be thinking about 2024, what would it be?
I'd have to say interoperability and digital. Digital standards, digital interoperability. There are some big changes coming through in the sector which are around the types of technology and the way in which that's going to streamline things. So, I mean, intermodality is one of these things. It's a lovely word. Nobody really knows what it means, but it's basically when you put things into a container, and it can be used on a road, it can be used on a train, it can be used on a ship, etc. So what we're looking at there is a way of coding an end-to-end journey and using that digital process to track that end-to-end journey. Now, think of the data that's in there. I'm an economist and I love data. So think about what we know then. We know the carbon emissions. We know how long it's going to take. We know what the political risks are because we know what the environment is that it's going through. We know an awful lot about the security of that transaction. So eventually, if we can start to use technology to create that system where everything is streamlined in that kind of a way, actually we can start to improve efficiencies within the sector. But the challenge at the moment, and this is why I think a lot of small organisations are holding back, the challenge at the moment is that they're not interoperable. Nobody has said this is a standard. And so, if they're working with you, they might have one set of standards. If they work with another organisation, there might be something different. And that means that they have to make choices about the types of technologies that they're introducing. And I think, if I'm a small business, boil it back down to how do I make money? I make money by keeping my costs low and making as much revenue as possible. So streamlining that whole process is really important.
So that interoperability, good word that, I like that one.
Fantastic.
But for interoperability, that data flow is incredibly interesting because if I look at my background in a supermarket, we had a barcode. Mm-hmm. A barcode is just a visual representation of numbers. It doesn't mean anything. And what we relied on was either our own system of what we matched that number to, or a more standardized system. But of course you can't use numbers forever. And actually one of the things that we do in our regular network to get a package from our vendors through to a parcel on a customer's door is by using barcodes and system interoperability to be able to map between the different systems, people and businesses that are touching that parcel to get it to their door. And one of the things that when I'm speaking to small businesses that they talk about is, does my legacy system match yours or match the people that you're working with? Or I'm introducing something new, will it still work with these other businesses that I'm working with? So what's your view on what we can do as an industry to make that work better?
So that barcode is an incredibly important piece of information. There's a very simple thing, which is start talking to the World Customs organisations and start talking to all the big freight and logistics ports and things like that, because those barcodes at the moment are not the mechanism by which taxes are determined, tariffs are determined, what you actually need to have finance from, say, a bank to get your good from A to B. So it's joining those things up. So that's where the interoperability problem is. It's making sure that that barcode has a little bit more information in it. So there is a move that's going on in the whole industry, actually, to make trade more digital and to make trade streamlined through digital finance and digital single windows, which will do this sort of using a barcode to take stuff over a border. So there are moves beginning to happen. The problem for a small organisation right at the bottom of the food chain, if you like, is that it's too slow, and there's a sense in which they don't want to invest in one technology because it might not be the right technology in terms of where the industry settles later. So it's actually something that I think has to be done collaboratively.
So it was interesting what you said about that redundancy, about making the wrong bet on the right piece of technology.
Yeah.
And we've seen that countless times in the technology industry where you make the wrong bet. Sony Betamax was probably better than VHS, and VHS was the one that eventually won before video disappeared. What ways could there be that for a small business to avoid that betting on the wrong horse?
So I think work with their suppliers, work with the people that they work with on a day-by-day basis, and make decisions based on where they're seeing gaps. So I've been in charge of 3 technology companies. So every single time, you lose an awful lot by making a decision too quickly. You do choose the Betamax and not the VHS. But if you make your decision strategically and look at what everybody else is doing and look at where your key markets are and who your key agents are within your supply chain, then that's something you can do. So introducing technology, don't ever think it's a panacea, always think it's a tool, because it's a tool to making things more efficient, only if you choose the right one. So make sure that everybody knows what you're doing and that everybody around you in your supply chain has compatible systems, and that the freight and logistics sector can read what you're doing as well.
So it's interesting what you say about investing early, because you also mentioned sustainability. And I think in sustainability, some of the bigger players, like Amazon, have got a responsibility to invest early. Because that redundancy, trying something new that is likely to help sustainability, but will it be the answer, is not necessarily going to work. And actually, within Amazon, we've committed to the climate pledge, so we'll be zero carbon by 2040. And to be able to get there, that is just around the corner.
Yeah.
We are going to have to experiment.
On climate, we don't have time on our side. And again, back to the survey, this was something that companies were really concerned about. And I quite often say, well, we talk about geopolitical adversaries, but look at the climate, it's actually not a geopolitical adversary, it's just a planetary adversary, and we can't do anything about it unless we start to move quickly. But I think that is something for smaller businesses that is totally terrifying. Because you think about how you might have to change your operations. You think about what you're going to have to record, because even organisations like you will want to make sure that people are doing things, everybody in the whole sort of value chain, if you like, is doing things in a way that is compatible with your net zero, and you will have to be reporting to the regulators and to the banks. So having a clear set of guidelines is the most important thing.
So you've talked about the past and the present. What, of course, is missing is the future. So I'd like to get your thoughts on what trends we might see in the short and medium term going forwards, and what our customers can do to mitigate those impacts.
I think it's quite straightforward, actually. The big challenge at the moment is the number of smaller organisations, smaller freight and logistics, but small businesses generally, who are being excluded from the future because of increasing costs, because of complexities around the industry. Very real challenges that we're going to face over the next few years, which is the speed of technological change, the introduction of AI. People are going to feel scared about all of that. How do we go about doing it? How do we make AI a tool rather than something that is this big scary thing and we're not quite sure how to deal with it? So technology, then geopolitics is obviously a big issue. We're living in a very fragile world that will affect the freight and logistics industry. And then sustainability. And sustainability is a big existential question. How do we help small and large shipping and logistics businesses deal with all of that? It's about building the slack that we've been talking about into the system. It's about giving them cost buffers. It's by giving them flexible access to finance. It's making sure that the delays are as little as possible, and that the knowledge around what technology is out there is as clear as it possibly can be, and the support is there to get rid of some of these legacy systems which are slowing things down, and the manual processes.
So that idea of the democratisation of the data, I think, is really interesting. The need to work together collaboratively and to share the data. I think neither of us would argue with each other to say it's incredibly important that we collaborate and that we share our data, so that that partnership can happen between our systems rather than people. So you were telling me before about the move from physical paper into that more data-driven world, and you've also talked about what governments can do. What's the trend for our shippers, for our customers? what should they be prepared for, and what should they be doing to help get that collaboration moving?
So this is really interesting. There is a huge move towards digital trade. That isn't just e-commerce. That is everything digitized. So taking away all of those manual processes and doing everything on a digital basis. So what it means is, instead of having a paper document that says this is how much is being shipped, this is what its value is, this is a port it's leaving from, this is a vessel it's going on, and this is where it's going to, instead of having that, you'd have it digitally. And you'd have it either in a blockchain, or you'd have it in the cloud, in some kind of a framework where it's verified. You know what it is, and you haven't got to keep reproducing it. It becomes something that is yours. That is secure data. And what's beginning to happen across trade and trade finance, so the banks are beginning to think about this more, is actually turning that digital document, that bill of lading document, into a document, what's called a document of title. In other words, it is a mechanism by which you can get finance, like a pound note used to be. You know, you have a pound note or a pound coin, and you are paid the amount that's on that document. This is the same thing, only done digitally. Now the issue is, of course, that has data in it and money in it. So you've got this complexity of money and data actually effectively becoming the same thing. So what we need to be looking out for in the industry is going along and understanding how trade is actually becoming more digital. You're beginning to see single window clearances at customs and excise, for example. The process is slow, but the impact on the global economy, I did some calculations on all of this, could be as much as $9 trillion US over the next 5 years. So it's colossal. So this is where the world of trade is going. We've got acts in the UK, the Electronic Documents Trade Act in the UK, which enables all of this digitisation. We've just recently signed a deal with a free trade deal, digital free trade deal with Ukraine. We've got one with Singapore and a couple of other countries as well. So what's happening is we're beginning to build a lot more of that digital thinking and digital structure and infrastructure into trade. And that's something that we really need to make sure that shippers are aware of.
So, really interesting hearing your passion for the future. So what does that Rebeccanomics version of the future look like? If you could create whatever that vision would look like, what's the economy going to be?
So, perfect world. A perfect world is one where, in trade, is one where technology allows the actual day-to-day business practice of doing trade to facilitate a smooth transition between A and B, stuff to be delivered on time, and actually to collect the data and do the hard work behind climate change and mitigation. So you talked about intermodality, for example. I think that's a very exciting prospect for saving time and saving the planet. I think there are all sorts of things. There's data out there. You've got data in your systems that will tell us so much about what's happening in terms of different carbon emissions, different processes, the organisations that might need some help, the organisations that are doing really well, effectively creating sort of carbon trading between them. I feel that there is, if we can move towards a system where digital and AI can work positively in trade, then that has to be a really good thing, because we see so much uncertainty at the moment. There are so many political risks out there. The situation is so fragile. Trade is the vector through which a lot of those fragilities are happening. And it's time that trade kicked back and said, we want to do it this way.
So I've seen some frustrating figures in the industry of, on a country basis, empty legs being as much as 15% or 30% or more, depending on which routes and the countries that it's moving between in the industry. I think what I heard was the Rebecca version of the future uses the data to get rid of those empty legs.
Yes, exactly.
So what can we be doing now to get that vision of the future to happen?
Using the data science that's out there and the artificial intelligence that's out there to understand what's causing those empty legs, because that gives you enough management information to be able to go, actually, I know why that's a problem, and then putting in place, back to just in case supply chains, what needs to be done in terms of management through a whole supply chain, using that information that you've got to make a sensible decision now. So the vision of the future is actually to use these tools. AI is brilliant, potentially, if you stop thinking about Frankenstein AI and start thinking about how we can use AI constructively. AI is brilliant for plugging the gaps that we don't know at the moment, so use it.
So I love the way that you linked the artificial intelligence and the machine learning to the impact on people, because I think for our customers, we've got the running the business and we've got the people in the business. And actually, it's something that we think about from our customer service to our shippers, because what I would love to do is to get machines to do the things that machines are good at, to save the fun work, the interesting work, the people interactions for the computers. As an example, one of the things that we're working on at the moment is machine translation, so that our customers have got an interface that works in their language so that they can retrieve things in their own language. And of course, the brilliant thing about data is it's languageless. The data can speak in any language. But I still like that human interaction. We've got 24/7 customer support with real people, because for the complex work, for the things that are out of the ordinary, that's what human beings are really good at doing. And I love that idea of using the artificial intelligence to do the things that can be automated and use people for the things that can.
So just to echo that, artificial intelligence, 2 words. One is artificial, the other is intelligence. The artificial can be done by the computers. The intelligence is always going to be human. You quite rightly asked me what companies should do about all of this and what we need to prepare for, but I said at the beginning, I'm an economist, so I always look at these things from a 50,000-foot viewpoint. I'm not on the ground, so what are you seeing? What are the key things that you think companies ought to be doing?
So I think the biggest one is inbound visibility, where the traditional freight world is, I know that a journey needs to happen from A to B. Look at the different range of providers that can move something from A to B and choose whichever has got the right mix of quality and price, contract the work to happen at A, and then wait for an answer at B. But some of these movements are across hundreds and thousands of kilometres or miles. Again, we talked about intermodal, where you're breaking up the leg into different sections, and therefore having the visibility of all the way through from pickup through to endpoint delivery and what's happening in the meantime, I think is incredibly important. To give an anecdote of a customer that we worked with, and it's one that we're working on to make the availability of different systems and interoperability, to your word earlier, increase. So to give the anecdote, we started working with a customer on that transactional, we'll pick up from A, we'll deliver to B basis. And what we did was connected our 2 systems via a third party and we've now got a permanent connection to the third party interface, and started work with them to increase from 0% to 87% visibility on the full movement from A to B. And what that's been able to do for that customer is they can manage their supply chain better. They can manage their within network transfers and match their operations at source to destination. And where they're delivering to customers, they've then got the view of the route. So those supply chain disruptions that you mentioned earlier, they can know when the disruption happens, rather than when you've got the B point and something doesn't turn up. So I think the right now version of what customers can do is to work on interfacing those systems. And it's one thing that we're spending a lot of our time doing, because I think once you've got that inbound visibility, that's not a future world 10 years vision. That's something that can happen right now.
I've given you my version of the world, the Rebeccanomics view of the world. So what is the philosopher view of the world, knowing full well that you are a philosopher? Where are we going to be in 10 years' time?
Yeah, so what I would love to see is that collaboration along with the data that we've talked so much about, really starting to deliver on a non-zero sum basis. Where, to take an example from my previous lifetime in fast-moving consumer goods, water from the Italian mountains has to be bottled at source. Water from the French mountains has to be bottled at source. Beers are often brewed in Belgium. You've got Italian customers of beer on a ski resort. You've got customers of water in all across Europe. You've got legs of 1 kilogram per litre water moving in different directions. And what I would love to see is that collaborative effort where, for example, if I was working in Amazon Freight with both of those customers, that I'd be able to tell each other there is a train moving from the French Alps through to Belgium. There is a train moving from Belgium to the French Alps, and get those customers to be able to use each other's freight. And those empty legs that we talked about, make them disappear. I think to get to that point, that collaboration is incredibly important from a data security point of view, from a business security point of view. It's important. But to take an example of a previous lifetime in supermarkets, many supermarkets have got their own fleets. They also take inbound from their suppliers, and they've got trains and trucks that are moving across different places. And if we can work together as an industry, if we can reduce those empty legs, we will move things a shorter distance in total with less empty legs. And maybe we would need to add some repositioning and work out who pays to reposition what. But I think the idea of just doing more with less is where I would like to get to in 10 years. And I think we've got the roadmap and the technology to be able to do it. We've just got to make sure that we get that collaboration, that we get the right level of data security between those businesses and the right thinking to be able to do that, to reduce cost and to save us on carbon.
Fantastic.
So we've now got pre-submitted questions from our shippers and questions from the audience. Thank you. Rebecca, how much of what you talked about is only going to be possible through governments stepping in?
Really interesting question, because I think one of the problems at the moment is a lot of this relies on heavy investment in infrastructure. You have to have the digital pathways, if you like, to be able to make some of these things work, and you have to be able to have the digital trade agreements as well. So there is a huge element of government in this. But go back to what I said while we were talking. In the end, it's businesses who trade. Businesses can do this, and governments can provide the support. If governments feel that this is what business wants, and businesses are going some way down the road to investing in all of these things because it is absolutely necessary, then governments can take a supportive role rather than a directing role. And I think that's what everybody would want.
What are some of the immediate changes that shippers can adopt to improve sustainability?
So immediately thinking about where the inefficiencies are in terms of energy consumption. So, this sounds trivial, but light switches and things like that. But where are those in your supply chain? Where the light switch equivalents in your supply chain that make you use less energy? What are the things that can be done? What data do you have to help you understand where you are being less efficient than you should be? So don't just think about, if you like, productivity in terms of costs and people and A to B. Think about it in terms of energy as well and energy efficiency, because at the moment, the only thing that we have to really, really, really report on from a legal point of view is actually energy. It's actually climate change and carbon emissions. So those are the only things right at this moment in time that we need to be thinking about. Everything else will come down the track over an 18-month, 2-year period. But at the moment, it's that we need to be thinking about most of all.
How can shippers future-proof in the face of this volatility?
So future-proofing is the same thing as resilience. So what are you doing within your organisation to guarantee resilience, to make sure you're still in business in 10 years' time, whatever happens? Uncertainty is the new normal, but uncertainty has always been out there. We just happen to have quite a lot of it at the moment. So what do you need to do? What problems do you have in your business that you need to solve now? How can you build up that type of slack to make sure that if something goes horribly wrong in the future, you've got some cash, you've got some people that are able to deal with it. So a lot of this is actually very human. Resilience is horribly human, actually. It's making sure that you've got the right systems, the right supply chain, you know who everybody is in that supply chain, but more than anything else, you're also making sure that you're managing your risks. So watch the patterns and trends, watch what's happening, hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand over the metal and the technology to you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm going very old school.
Still technology.
But it's still technology, exactly. So questions from the audience and from shippers for you. So what is Amazon Freight doing to reduce rescheduling of loads, especially for non-Amazon deliveries?
Yeah, so rescheduling, to all of the points that we've talked about earlier on, is frustrating because supply chain is about reducing that volatility. And looking at the two businesses that I've worked in for a long time, I was working in the physical retail space, and I'm now working in Amazon. And just looking at the SKU count in Amazon, we call it ASIN, looking at the SKU count in e-commerce versus physical retail, it's bigger by an order of magnitude. And I think one of the things that opened my eyes working in Amazon is how much additional complexity adds on with a small SKU count, never mind the incredibly large difference that I've seen working from physical retail into e-commerce. So I think the biggest thing is that having worked in the supply chain space in Amazon for so long, understanding that complex version with literally millions of SKUs in stock right now across Europe versus that thousands, tens of thousands world that I used to work in. One of the things that we're doing is trying to translate that complexity that the Amazon retail business needs versus the simplicity that our customers need. And trying to do that translation of simple physical world through to complex electronic world. We're working on digitalization of the total journey and sharing that with our customers via inbound visibility. We're working with the 24/7 customer service that we have. We're working on when the blockages happen, what can we do to unblock them? And then we're working to make when we do change things, make that visible to the customers. And if we can do that over peak, we can certainly do that in the new year.
Fantastic. So the next question is one around investment. Will Amazon Freight be investing in alternative equipment in the near future?
Well, that's an easy answer, yes. So how we're working is we've developed the network that we have for Amazon because Amazon needed it. As we've had the growth that we've seen over the last few years, we've struggled to find partners able to invest at the same pace that our customers needed it. As a result, we've built this freight network for what works for getting Amazon into, through, and out of the Amazon network to our customers. The reason that Amazon Freight was created was to share that network with new business customers. But of course, what works for Amazon as a business doesn't work for our customers in 100% of cases. So what the steps that we're taking is to release feature and segment of product at a time, at the point where we can have confidence of delivering the customer obsession that we talk about so much in Amazon. So at the moment, we've got a full truckload product in the UK and in continental Europe, and we've got a less than truckload, i.e. pallet at a time, product in the UK and in Germany. And we're confident at the reliability that we can offer for those products. We're gradually adding product and service one by one, building the capacity beforehand. Then at the point where we're confident that we can deliver the right customer service level, we're then releasing that available to our customers. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is yes, when we can guarantee the customer delivery.
Brilliant, thank you. The final question I think is absolutely brilliant. It's what are you most excited to be working on within Amazon Freight?
Well, for a start, I'm just excited to be working in Amazon Freight. It is wonderful being able to work in a startup business that's got the backing of one of the most impressive logistics and data companies in the world. Specifically, though, what I'm excited about is that working with customers, because this same network that we've developed over tens of years now, Amazon's been around for 30, so it's not many tens. But the network that works for us is the companies that I'm talking to now and the individuals in those businesses. Those customers are shaping the future of Amazon Freight. So the products that we're building, that we're putting on our roadmap to build, are a direct reflection of the shipper survey that we've just talked about. The reason that we're working together is that we're using that research to build those pieces at a time. And what's really exciting is to be working in a business that's as vast in market segments as Amazon is, but in a part where you can be really close to customers and literally design a business around what those customers are saying.
Brilliant, thank you.
So thank you for those thoughts. I'm incredibly pleased that we started working together on the research and we've now had some time to discuss it. But I would like to understand, what are your closing thoughts for this chat?
Wow, I've really enjoyed this as well. And my closing thoughts, I think what's been most interesting of all is how the research identified a set of challenges, cost, technology, uncertainty, etc. And we've addressed all of those as we've gone through, and actually violently agreed on how we should be moving forward. So key things like planning, like looking at the environment, like understanding transparency of data, and so on. All of those things are incredibly important, and I think it's just been nice to see that from a practical angle as well as from a research angle, those things actually have aligned.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time today and coming all the way to see us. Thank you to our shippers for coming and joining us and giving us so much of your valuable time. And thanks for those of you that have joined us here. Hope you have a wonderful remainder of your week.